You have the right to remain silent. Anything that you say will be held against you and used in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you. No, police do not always need to warn you of your rights during a stop that may lead to your arrest or while you wait in jail. I hope I'm right with saying this. Um, Today's guest is the founder and CEO of Black Sanctuary, an education power platform that's created to teach private citizens, especially Black Americans, how to interact when being pulled over by police. His career in life in law enforcement has spanned the federal, state, municipal levels of government. In addition, leading law enforcement. Our guest has the skills and reputations that has crossed agencies and their relationships has led him to be part of special task force assigned to agencies throughout his career. He has worked in business as an executive, protection services, keeping many of the world's billionaires safe in their transportation or in activities during the world. He is now the owner of his own physical security business. He is also a best-selling children's author with a book called Police and Me, a groundbreaking book that addresses the essential questions often asked by children. Our guest is a father, a proud HBCU graduate who enjoys strength training, meditation, martial arts, and yoga. Today, we will learn his story. We'll talk about why was it necessary for him to write this book, Police and Me. And if you stay around long enough, you'll learn just what to say when talking to police. Now, I want to put my disclaimer out there. This interview may make some uncomfortable for non-African American or Black Americans, but keep in mind, education is not designed to make you comfortable. It's designed to make you think. This episode is brought to you by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network. Throughout the power of a story, our mission is to uplift, educate, and share experiences and perspectives using the framework of teaching, learning, and modeling. Our purpose is very simple. It's creating hope. Let me welcome my guest today. My name is Kevin McLemore. I'm a speaker, author, and the host of Talking with Kevin and Son. I want to welcome entrepreneur, best-selling author, father, humanitarian, and friend, Mr. Derrick Dotson, to the show. DD, what's going on, bro?
Thank you for that. That's the best intro I've ever received. Thank you. No,
You
I
know
appreciate
something?
it.
Your resume is huge, and I wanted to make sure I get everything right on the first take, and because we know each other personally, and this interview is stemming from a personal conversation that I had shared with you about my history. Many people have heard me say numerous of times, with the exception of this year, and I knock on wood, that I have not, since 16 years of age, have not experienced 1 year, one physical calendar year, without randomly being stopped by law enforcement. I shared with you a story when I was working for Julio Franco and the Cleveland Indians as a strength and conditioning coach that I had just pulled out the stadium, had just got on the on-ramp and wasn't within 20 meters before I was pulled over. I happened to be driving a BMW M6. I happened to be dressed in, at that time, the Cleveland Indians practice uniform, a sweatsuit. I had a baseball cap and I had a gold chain around my neck. And when I was pulled over, I asked why I was being pulled over. I was asked to give my license and registration. And I was always taught to keep my hands on the steering wheel. At that time, my license and registration was in the glove box. And I had asked, why I was pulling over. Never once did the officer explain to me just why I was pulled over. The conversation, seemed to be going not in my favor as I questioned the reason we're being pulled over. I had never broken the law. And after sharing that story with you, and I don't want to bore everyone with this story, you gave me some very helpful hints of how I was leading myself into a situation that I could have possibly been arrested just because. If it had not been for Julio Franco at that time driving by and identifying me, this story would probably be a little different. So I want to thank you for coming to the show. I want to thank you for being extremely open and honest, especially someone that has been in the law enforcement, especially someone that when you talk about the teachings at law enforcement, officers have been trained, you have been at the spearhead of that conversation. The first question I want to ask you, and before we go to a deep dive and talking about your book, talk about the experience and what questions or what to say and not to say, this interview, I hope, will open the eyes and ears of both Black and whites regarding our safety in dealing with law enforcement. I hope you agree, and I'll say we must agree there is a bias and a stereotype when it comes to Black men and people of color. There's a stereotype that Black men that are taller, well-built, are intimidating forces and more likely to be physically abused by law enforcement than others. Derrick, you have two sons. You have a 5-year-old. Tell me, when is it a good time to talk to your children as a person of color, a melanated person of color, about the system that has been set originally to incarcerate and cost us our freedom, and maybe at some points may even cost us our life? When is a good time to have this conversation?
That's a great question. We're not going to get heavy into the book, but I wrote the book for ages 3 to 10. Okay. My son was 3 when I actually wrote the book, The Police and Me. I the when it comes down to talking about, when you say, like, specifically, melanated persons, when I think about Black folks in these situations, yes, my company is called the Black Sanctuary because we are the ones that are disproportionately have been affected by law enforcement throughout the history of law enforcement in this country. And but at the same time, I don't talk about race as much with children. Um, my youngest Duke is 5, right? He goes to a school with a preschool with a bunch of kids that don't look like him. He's the only Black kid there, but there's white and Asian and Indian, and they don't see each other that way yet, right? They love on each other, hug on each other, and it's just interesting when you see the parents when we interact versus the kids the way they interact. Like, we're kind of maybe exercising some of our own biases when we look at or talk to one another. The kids just love on each other. I don't bother talking about the race part with him yet. He is identifying, what it is to be Black, and I'm teaching him that. But in regards to law enforcement, when I talk to kids about this, especially elementary school age children, they're super inquisitive, far more inquisitive than any adults that I ever meet. They are less biased about these things. I think it's a great time to talk to them about it, but it depends on how you talk to them about it. When I wrote the book, I was very objective about what I said and how I said certain things. Very particular about it, because when I was raised, yes, I worked in law enforcement, right? But I never heard one positive thing about police my entire life. Most of my family had been in and out of prison, and that's something I'm more willing to share these days, just so people understand where I'm coming from. But a lot of my family had been in and out of prison or jail, so I'd never heard anything positive about police. So I never knew how to interact with them. So everything I'd ever heard was negative. I didn't really have that guidance. And the first time I was pulled over could have gone poorly. Definitely the second time I was pulled over could have gone even worse. And we'll talk about those things. But if you enter these situations and talking to children in a very biased point of view, that's what's going to end up happening when they interact with those officers. They're learning from us. They're watching us. They're looking at the news. They're on social media. They hear the news. They hear they hear their parents. They hear their uncles, aunts, or cousins, or whoever talking about these things and talking about them in a very particular way. Well, they just do this to us, and they treat Black people like this, or they use whatever expletive to explain certain things. And I've seen that happen. When I was writing the book, it actually occurred to me that there was an officer that I worked with at a police department. I'll tell you, it was the Renton Police Department. It's no secret there. And I still have a great relationship with them. She was in, for all intents and purposes, she was a blonde hair, blue eyed female. And we were on our way to a call or to do something. I have no idea what we were getting ready to do, but we were driving and she sees these four boys on the side of the road, happened to be, four black boys. I think had to be the youngest, maybe had to be 10, 9 or 10. Oldest might have been 11 or 12. So let's just say somewhere between 9 and 12. And like most cops do that are really good at community engagement, she said, "Hey, Dotson, I want to stop and give these kids some candy or some stickers." It's something what cops do all the time. And, I'm like, I'm on my computer. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever. And she pulls over, I rolled the windows down so I could hear. She gets out, she's halfway across the street, and she says, "Hey, guys." And they turned around and they called her every female derogatory name, every racist name for somebody white, every derogatory name about police came out of their mouths. And these were children. And I remember feeling angry, just like as angry as I was when you first told me the story of what happened to you. I was angry because, Uncle Derrick and me came out. I have nephews and nieces, right? So in my mind, I'm like, it's like my nephews and nieces. And I remember stepping out of the car and I'm like, I got a deep voice and I'm like, "Hey," and they look and they started running and they took off running. My partner that day, she turns around and she has tears in her eyes. She doesn't cry, but her eyes are, watery. Her face is, flushed. And she sits in the car and I look at her and I'm like, "Hey, you okay?" And she stops and she says, "Dotson, we're fine. Let's just go." And we never talked about it again until last fall. The same police department, I haven't been there in years, invited me to a training. And they were talking to me about the work that I do with kids. And I was explaining some of that. And she was in the crowd. She still works there. And I was just like, there's something that I've been talking about. And I shared that story. She didn't even remember it. Okay. But it says a lot about who some police officers are. Not everybody would have responded the way that she did. She just was like, "Hey, you know what? That's a messed up situation. I was just trying to connect with the community." Some other officer could have taken that in a completely different way and have been uh, far more aggressive about that and overly aggressive even. Not that I would have allowed it, but the point is that I could have seen that happening. Those kids didn't learn that day. Okay, they modeled that came from somewhere. Okay, and I see that, and that's why I think it's so important to talk to kids as young as possible, especially if you're leaving your kids with other people to watch them. And I especially would say for Black parents, if you're leaving your children with a white friend or family member, neighbor, it's important for your kid to know these things about police interaction because some folks don't think it applies to them. I just dealt with a situation in the past week where, people kind of had this idea that the things that I talk about with policing don't apply to white communities, and that was frustrating in itself. But the fact that, that's the situation, it's so important to talk to your child as young as possible about it. I don't get involved with race so much unless they bring it up. If a kid brings it up, I'll talk about it. But when I talk to parents about it, I'm like, let's be as objective as possible. And I'll wrap up this question by saying this is I did the best, the biggest book tour I've done so far was in New York. Was I read to about 1,500 kids in 4 days, and we handed out a bunch of books to the schools, and it was really cool. The questions that I got from the kids were amazing, and I mean these Q&As, these question and answer periods could have gone on time. Like the teachers had to cut it off every single time because they would ask a ton of questions. but the questions were awesome, Tony. Like, I mean, Kevin. I mean, I'm sorry, Kevin. I was
That's
thinking
okay.
about you. Look just like my. You actually look like a good friend of mine. I'm sorry, Tony Rush is his name.
All right.
And but anyway, he when I think about a lot of these things that parents talk about with their kids, they're so biased about it. I had to write a parent guide after that book tour. If I had to write a parent guide just about what parents should say to their kids in that situation, because I wouldn't want parents going to answering the same questions that I got from these kids in a way that comes off biased, right?
Right.
That they're leading them down that same path that I could have been led down. And that very first traffic stop that I had I went that direction with a police officer that was already a little bit heated, already a little bit aggressive, maybe that was just a show he was putting on. Maybe he actually felt that way. I don't know, but I know for a fact, based on his statements, that my interaction with him changed how he perceived me and how the stop ended up. So, in summary, yes, I would definitely say talk to your kids as young as possible, but go from a place of objectivity as much as possible until they can understand maybe like the nuances of race, so they can understand that. A lot of kids don't even understand the difference between, I've had this at elementary schools, they don't know the difference between police and the army, right? And you have to explain, well, city, state, country, they don't really understand that at that age. So when you try to get into nuances of race, like that's very confusing to them because, when I would read to Duke about Martin Luther King, he just looks at it like, Papa, that's not very nice. Why did they treat that little boy like that? What do you mean? It was the color of his skin. That doesn't make sense. And it makes no sense to them. I think there's a proper time to do that. But when it comes down to policing, I try to be as objective as possible. And I would definitely advise parents or any other guardians to approach it that way based on my experience.
And that's the reason why I wanted to ask this and ask that question of you, is because in most Black communities, I don't think there's a family in any Black community that doesn't have someone that does not have a positive history with law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Most of it's negative, and a lot of it is because we live in areas that it's easier to arrest us and incarcerate us for a longer period of time on simple
Yeah.
stuff that other people are privileged to because of financial wherewithal. They can basically buy their freedom back in a system. And so I agree with you. I've got many friends that are currently like you that are in law enforcement, that when we have these conversations, we also know that there is conversations that we have people that are dressed in a uniform that have a conversation with us. And when they're with like-minded people, have a totally different conversation. And those conversations turns into experiences that will end up on the 6 o'clock news. Now, one of the things is I'm going to share this with our audience. Every guest that I have, I normally ask a questionnaire. And one of the things that I've always asked, because I never want guests to show up on my show and be ambushed, I've asked them, is there any particular topic or conversation or questions that you do not want to be asked? I never want someone to ever regret coming on the show. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
read your statement verbatim. I am
Okay.
open to most anything. I spend most of my time on facts and not my opinion. News media does enough of that. And I want to be objective. I want to be an objective person that you can turn to when you need answers. What's good about my subject matter is resolves around the truth regarding law enforcement and policing. If someone wants to debate with me, I'll do is tell them to find the legislation and that they're referring to, and they can decide for themselves. It was by far one of the most honest answers I've ever given out of over 200 interviews that I've sent out this questionnaire, and I want to appreciate you for that. And
Thank you.
that's the reason why I opened the show the way that I did. And I want to talk about your book because it's a great book. It's a quick read. I know most people don't like to read, and I always say that they haven't found a book that they love reading. But if you want to see the other side of the coin and understand the conversation, is that our current legal system should be set up to protect and serve. Our original legal system was basically to return people of color back into slavery, which now they call the penal system. It's another version of that. It's just worded and funded differently by many of our private agencies. But you wrote this book because conversation has to start honestly at home. And it has to be not with your bias, but it has to be subjective on the truth. And so I want to thank you for writing the book. Before we turn to the next page of this interview, where can they find your book and how can they get in touch with you for speaking engagements? You speak all over the world. When I'm going to ask you to give a little bit more of your bio, this man, I mean, if anyone has ever watched any movie with The Rock in it and watched the stunts and stuff he does and the way that he handles, this man is the real deal. This man teaches, he enforces this, he knows every inch of the law. He, like I said, he's protecting billionaires for a reason. This is a person, basically, if you see him coming, my advice to you is to reach out and shake his hand and ask for his autograph. Don't do anything else other than that, because he is physically fit. He is a track star within his own age. He's an Olympic gold medalist, but he's one of the kindest people I know. And we never want to be in the room when until happens. All right. So going back to the question, where can we find the book and how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, we can. Well, Amazon was the first place that I published, and then you can also find it any place that books are sold online: Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target, any place books are bought and sold online. There's a lot of libraries that we're learning that have, as we called around to different libraries around the country, it turns out that they already have the book on their shelves, which is pretty awesome. And I'm really happy to see that. So yes, Amazon and any Barnes and Noble or any place that books are sold online, you can find it.
Right.
The Police and Me, right here.
Police and Me. That's his book right there in the background of Police and Me. It's well written. It's in full living color. It's an easy read to comprehend. Has his contact information in it. It's a conversation that we all need to have with our children, because every cop is not a bad cop. All right, I want to say that no matter what color of their skin and what you see portrayed as our police department in these situations that are questionable, that make the 6 o'clock news, is not a correct representation of many of my friends and family members, because I've got a sister that wears a uniform that don't reflect that. Anyone can have a bad day, anyone can have a moment, but we have a responsibility when a law enforcement officer pulls us over. And my guest today is basically going to tell you exactly what you should and what you shouldn't do. The reason why an officer is asking you these questions, and sometimes the wrong questions can lead you into hearing what I said, opening up your Miranda rights. And so hopefully we never want to ever hear that being read to us. And I know there are states that, will frequently abuse the law in their favor. And I'll talk about understanding qualified immunity thereafter. But I do know you have a personal story. Many of my friends all talk about, at the end of the day, they have a family they need to return to. We often see on the news when someone is holding a knife, is why you have to use deadly force. And I know you have been an instructor in teaching that. And I know since you have left government service, armed forces service, and started your own company, and you have a personal experience with a friend that's been lost, you see it from a different way. So you've been stopped before as a law enforcement officer. You want to share your experience, and then let's do a deeper dive into what you can and shouldn't say when being pulled over by an officer. I'll let you have it from there.
Kevin, let me be clear. All right. I've been pulled over more than 4 dozen times in my life. Somewhere in the low 50s. I think it's like 52 or 53, something like that.
You do know
My
this is
first
not a
traffic.
comp. You do know this is not a competition.
Well, I mean, I would be number one every place I go. I haven't seen it. I definitely have not met anyone that has these types of experiences. I think what makes it unique, before I really get into it, is what makes it unique is for me is, a lot of what people talk about when it comes down to policing in America is the next thing is race, right? Um, when you understand more about the law, and you understand police policies. If you understand the policies, then you understand the training. If you understand the training, it makes sense, for the procedures. It goes in that order. When you understand that, you look at it and you see, like, it's not. I understand what the media is trying to do. They're trying to get you to click. They're trying to get you to watch. They're trying to get you to go on social media and share it. It's clickbait. A lot of times, when they talk about race, it's not always about that. Some of these things are, if you look at it from an objective point of view, you're going to understand that, well, this person did this, and this is why this person did this thing, and this officer responded to them in a correct way, right? But the fact that I've been pulled over so many times, even while I was in law enforcement, even as an instructor, all of those things, it didn't matter because I didn't lead with that when I got pulled over. But being having those experiences as a Black man, as someone that has been on every level of law enforcement, but also being the subject of dozens of traffic stops. My cousin is the one that was shot and killed by police while I was working in law enforcement. I have two other family members that have successfully sued police departments for police brutality. I've been held at gunpoint, stop and frisk, all of that. The things that most people see on television and movies or hear about in the news are things that I've experienced. And so it just tells me once again that the fact that I'm out here, I'm talking to you, I'm talking to your listeners, I'm talking to children across the country, and talking to the community organizations and parents and police departments across this country, that this is something that I was put here for. Those experiences, it would be a waste if I didn't share those with people. And so that's just a little bit about me, and how the reason why I speak about these things so objectively, because the objectivity in this bothers people sometimes. Like, well, you should be on this side or you should be on that side. It doesn't make sense to me to pick a side in this situation. I have too much experience and knowledge about it just to say, well, the Black people are treated like this. Yeah, sometimes cops, are this. Yeah, they're great sometimes. They're horrible sometimes. And so going into that, um, when I get pulled over, and when I've been pulled over, I have I don't have the same reaction that a lot of people have. I started all of this work with my company, the Black Sanctuary, yet long before I even wrote the book, The Police and Me. This was all about wanting people. I kept hearing from people in 2020, all of the folks that kept calling me from across the country were saying, well, Derrick, why is this happening? And then Black folks would say, why is this happening to us? And I didn't feel like that all the time because I'm looking at what was happening and I'm like, yeah, well, that guy was clearly resisting. Yeah, but they didn't have to do this. And I'm like, no, they didn't. But I'm telling you why it started, right? And how this progressed. Now, did the officer do the right or wrong thing? Yes. Is that officer likely going to prison? Yes. And I'm usually pretty right about that. I'm pretty on point about predicting what's going to happen in those situations. If you understand the basics of use of force and of the law, it's really not complicated. And so when I would explain these things to people, hey, this is what the law is for use of force, and just to note, it's the same thing that it is for you to use self defense or deadly force as a private citizen. It's the same thing. So when people talk about, oh, that police officer did this, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, it makes sense to you that it went down like that. That officer shouldn't have done this thing, but you understand, had you been in the same situation, you could have reacted the same way. And I would probably advise you to react in the same way. Now, the difference between you and a police officer is they have a duty, right? That's it's not their right, it is their duty. And so that's the difference that stands in between, where you can't be aggressive. You can't go into a situation looking for quote unquote trouble, or you can't be the one that's provoking something. Police officers, they're allowed to investigate. And that reasonable suspicion might lead to probable cause, and that probable cause might lead to an arrest. And during that arrest might turn into a use of force situation. And then that type of thing escalates. If you understand that, then you can kind of step back and look like, okay, well, these are some things that I probably should do and things that I shouldn't do when I'm interacting with police. And out of all those traffic stops, I've never had a use of force situation. Use of force is let me be clear, use of force is the amount of force necessary to bring a subject under control. All right, I'm pretty sure that is the Department of Justice's definition of use of force. Department of Justice, I go with that usually because that is federal. So no matter where you go, there's going to be some variation of the Department of Justice's definition of use of force. So it's the amount of force necessary to bring someone under control. If you understand that, and you understand the things that police are going to be looking for, and when I say the use of force, and I say it's called the use of force model, okay? The use of force model is the police officers, I call it their playbook. I remember talking to some police chiefs about it. They were like, Derrick, we never even thought about it like that. It's a playbook. And the playbook is like, okay, well, Kevin is doing this, so I'm supposed to do that. And you hope they get it right, okay? They don't have to do that thing exactly. It could be that it warrants a light touch, an escort technique, as they would call it. Hand on the elbow, hand on your wrist, and they start moving you along. But they're like, no, taser, right? Or no, we're going to take this guy down to the ground. Or let me just draw my firearm. Like you're hoping that they get it right. And so the things to avoid, and let me be clear, and all the police officers out there, if you're upset by this, it's something that you need to rectify. You need to get straight with yourself. I tell police all the time, and I tell private citizens all the time, I would never, ever trust a random police officer to use the correct amount of force, that the necessary amount of force on me. I'm not a small guy. I'm strong. I look like it. And I don't trust their reaction to me doing anything that might be perceived as aggression. And that's all it takes. It's their perception and what they can articulate of what type of force is needed. Okay. So when I look at
You
that type
said
of
that.
thing, yes. So because it's one thing when, like I said, you can have the use of force model, as I call the playbook, and they can say, yeah, well, I think, Kevin was doing this, so I think we should do this. Yeah, don't put them in that situation, because they're going to imagine, if it's me, and again, this is not to be braggadocious, but I have at least 10,000 hours more training than any officer you're ever going to meet, ever. Tactics, self-defense, shooting, all of that stuff. I am people like me that train to that level. Your mindset, continues to evolve during that time, and those people like us that are that trained tend to be the ones to use force the least. We know what we're capable of. I have more time. Okay. I know how close I can get to you. I'm not walking up to every situation and throwing my hand on my gun. Wait, stop right there. I'll walk right up to you. Most situations, I can walk up to you like, hey, man, what's going on? All right. I know what I can do. All right. And I know what I can't do. A lot of people a lot of police officers tend to be very afraid. Okay. A lot of them are very much out of shape. They don't use that 1 hour a day that they get to work out. Okay, they use that maybe writing reports or eating or whatever, and the training that it takes for hands-on, like uh, wrestling type like grappling type of techniques. A lot of them don't do. A lot of them are starting to do more jujitsu now, which helps. But when you look at a situation like that, a lot of them are afraid. I have to look at it from that point of view. And so I don't put myself in a situation where I'm going to make this officer feel intimidated. Okay. So does that make sense where we're at with
It makes
that?
a lot of sense. And I was
Okay.
actually going to ask that question because a lot like yourself, with a little bit less of that um, Rambo type movie star training that you have. You know, I come from a physical background. I am,
Mm-hmm.
when most people look at me, I'm not a small guy. I'm not an unfit looking person, nor am I unfit. I live my lifestyle. Um, and I say every day when when my kids are in the house, it's like, it's not guaranteed that I'm going to come home because I'm one traffic stop away of being one caught off guard,
Mm-hmm.
may be tired, may say ask the wrong question, may be handled the wrong way, may respond the wrong way to being handled, or it's easier to shoot me than it is to try to wrestle me to the ground. Because, I looked at the fact that, and I asked myself, because I've got that hero mentality. I'm the type of person that will run into a burning building to bring out people.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at the George Floyd situation, I'm going, me personally, I don't know if I could have stood by watching this young man being choked to death and at least not knock the cop off of him so he can get a breath. They would have shot me that day. And I said, that's
Mm-hmm.
been one of my biggest fears is, of someone not having a good day runs into me when I'm not on my day. I know that, another situation that I had someone that was not black in my car. When we got pulled over, I was at a four-way stop. There wasn't a car in eyesight. And I said, watch, within 25 yards, a cop is going to fall out of the sky. And I was being sarcastic and pull me over. And I had not gotten within a mile of that traffic light. And all of a sudden the lights were over. And the first thing I did, put my hand on the steering wheel, you know, cut my car off. And I sat there and I waited. He pulled over. He asked for my driver's license or registration. And I said, it's in the glove box. He says, where are you going? I said, I just came home from church. And he said, driver license registration. I said, officer, I said, I have no idea why you pulled me over. You've got to have a good reason. And my friend was sitting there yelling, you have no reason to stop him. He wasn't doing anything. I said, just be quiet, just be quiet, just calm down. And then in another tone, asked my driver's license and registration. I said, because I'm in fear of being shot in my back. I said, I am not reaching into my glove box. I said, I refuse to. And from conversations that you had with me early on when we were talking, I am walking myself into trouble. I know I'm not the only man that feels that way. But I
No.
know that I'm at a point that I've been stopped so many times. I have been um, considered a lookalike for someone that has committed a crime during an hour. And I said, you know something? I have played sports on every single level. I've been a model citizen. I contribute to my community. I volunteer. I speak all over the place to both young and old. I'm an active member of my church. And why is it every single time I turn around, they look at me like I've broken the law? What do I have to do to overcome this? And that's the reason why you're on the show today, because I'm at that point that I may put myself in danger. So how do we address these things? What's the first thing that I need to do?
The first thing that I always tell everybody to do is just be cool. When I mean be cool, just be calm. And I understand that's the opposite response that most people are going to have, because the one thing I kept hearing, Kev, was fear. Derrick, I am scared to death when I see the lights come on behind me. I've had children, man, it bothers me. I've had children say, I thought I was going to die when the police officer came. Whoa. I've had teenagers tell me that they don't want to get their license because they don't want to get pulled over, because if they get pulled over, they might be killed. I've heard this from Black kids. I've heard this from white kids. Okay.
Oh my.
And it doesn't make sense to me. For instance, like, I know that I can help you with this. I don't want you to miss out on this, great privilege that we have in this country of having a driver's license and all of the cool, things and the excitement that comes from that. And you'll miss out on that because of this fear that you have that I know I can fix. Um, this fear that Black parents had when they came to me and said, Derrick, I don't know what to tell my kid on what to do when they get pulled over because I don't know what to do. Which is why in the book, at the beginning, when Duke and I get pulled over, I actually go through the steps. And it's told from Duke's point of view in the book, but I wanted parents to understand, hey, this is what you have to do. And it's basic enough that no matter where you are, day or night, whatever state you're in, you go through those procedures, you are more than halfway home. Okay. And I'm going to go through that with you. But just to set that up, I don't want people to be in fear. People fear the things they don't understand, which is why I break the things down the way that I break it down. I use the language that I use. It's not over opinionated. It's not incendiary in any way. I'm trying to make sure that you are informed, and then you can also go research the things that I say. Well, he said this. Now I'm going to tell you and all your listeners something. Do not get pulled over and say Derrick Dotson said, because that's not going to work out well. All right. Don't go calling me from your traffic stop, because I'm going to be like, Kev, you're more than welcome to put the phone down and I'll listen, but I'm not getting involved. Right. Don't go telling the police. Don't go telling police that Derrick Dotson told you. That's my disclaimer here. It is important. And I don't care for this, is not just for driving, this is for everything. I'm the guy that talks about laws, and I live my life that way. I don't do illegal things. I don't hang around people that do those types of things. You have to be aware of that. But one thing I'll say is always know the laws for where you are and for what you do. Okay. I don't care what profession you're in. If you do it in Washington State and then you're doing it in New York the next, might be different laws. Same profession, different laws. Know the laws for where you are and what you do. Very important. Okay. That said, when I talk about what to do when you get pulled over, the things the steps that I go through are meant to be empathetic to police officers, because I understand I've been parts of their training at the academy. And you got to understand, like, some of these folks, they come into these positions and they are scared. They are scared. They sat there and watched all of these videos of police being killed. This is part of their training. They watch all of these videos and all of these different these incidents where police officers have been shot, killed, murdered in the course of their job. And, walking up to a car in broad daylight, walking up to a car at night, walking up to a car that had kids in it, and lost their lives or came within inches of losing their life because they were beaten almost to death. I have those videos. And I understand why these officers approach things with caution. They don't know who you are when they pull you over. Again, I speak from both sides of this. You don't know who they are. Okay. Police officers, they go through the background. They go through hiring, right? They go through their hiring standards, and they go through background and polygraph in most places, but every place that I know has polygraph at this point these days, which is not fun at all. Polygraphs, drug tests, psych evals, but that's it. A lot of police departments and most agencies in most states do not do that on an annual basis. For instance, the FBI does that on an annual basis. Okay. They check those things. They do the background. Hey, have you had any have you had any interactions with law enforcement? Drug tests, psych evaluations, polygraphs. I think everybody should do that, but they do not. Municipal police departments do not. So you don't know who this person is. They could be, like you said, having a bad day. Like anybody can have a bad day. They might have lost somebody close to them. Their dog could have died, or they might have a parent that's sick or ailing, or they might be grieving. You never know. You never know. These person could have a drug problem. You wouldn't know about it unless somebody reports it or something else happens. And this could be the person that's approaching your car. Is that every police officer? No. Do I know what police officer is going to be? No. So I have a standard on how I approach every single situation when I get pulled over. That said, when I see those lights come on behind me, I'm cool. Like personally, I already know what's going to happen. I know what's going on. Um, if I was driving fast, I can acknowledge that. Most times I've been pulled over, I would say at least half of the times that I've been pulled over, it was them being nosy, right? It was them like, who is this guy? I'm a black man that lives in a predominantly white area, and I drive a nice car, and I keep it clean, so it's shiny. And so it's that type of thing where I believe that has a lot to do with it sometimes. But when I see those lights come on behind me, most times these days I'm listening to an audiobook. I rarely listen to music in my car, but if there's music on, whatever it's on, I turn it off, right? You don't want that distraction or going on while you're talking to a police officer. Um, Music goes off, and I'm immediately pulling over, right? If you can do this simultaneously, windows down, all of my windows, because I have tint. Okay. I want the officer to be able to see in my vehicle. Windows down, radio is off at this point. If I'm on the phone, depending, I hang up. I'm not really pressed about that. If you feel like you want to have a witness, fine. Tell them to mute the phone and do not add anything to the conversation, right? You don't need that. Go ahead and put it on speaker, whatever it is, so they can hear, but make sure that they mute it because it's not important for them to add anything to it that can make it any more stressful than it already is. Once I pull over, and pull over immediately, by the way, I'm not in favor so much of, oh, well, I want to get to some place where there's more people. A lot of police officers, again, they look at these situations. They don't know who you are, where you're coming from. They might have been pulling you over for speeding, and now you're not stopping. Well, what's going on with this person? Did they just rob a bank? Did they just kidnap someone? Is there someone in their trunk? They have no idea what they're walking up on, right? You were swerving. Could you be drunk? Could you be passing some chips to your kid? Who knows? They don't know. So when you approach these situations, understand how they might be looking at it. Windows down, radio off. I'm on the phone. I usually hang up. Once I pull over immediately, and I take the keys. If you have keys in the ignition, keys out of the ignition, put them on the dash. A lot of cars are push button start. Push the button. Don't go looking for your keys and moving around. They call those furtive movements, suspicious movements. This person was moving in a furtive manner, a report might say, meaning that they were moving around in a suspicious way. You want to avoid that because that's where the suspicion comes in. Ooh, what is this person up to? What's Kevin doing in the car? All right. The keys on the dash, the reason why that's important is one, the engine is off. They know you're not going anywhere. They see the keys. Oh, this person's not. It disarms a police officer to a point. Now, let's look at it in a reverse point of view. Police officer approaching the car. Oh, the car's off. Interesting. I can see all the way in and through the car. If it's at night, in addition, the dome light is on. Okay. I want them to be able to see everything. As they move up, they can see me. My hands are on top of the steering wheel, 10 and 2. Fingers spread, nothing in my hands. No phone in my hand, anything that could look like anything else. Absolutely not. Hands, top of the steering wheel, 10 and 2, fingers spread. The only thing that you could add to this, and it is, and I would be careful about how you do it, but it very much disarms police officers on a regular basis because they want to own that situation. They want to go into that situation like, I know I'm going to be able to do my job here, and I get to go continue on with my shift, and I get to go home tonight. All right. They want to know that. So sometimes when I do this, I'll put my hands out of the window, palms facing the officer. Okay. Um, for Black folks, I say light side out, right? And and make sure there's nothing in your hands. Once again, if you have on dark gloves, no, absolutely not. It can look like something else coming out. A lot of guns are black. They see hands coming out in whatever way they could perceive it that way. Hands out of the window. When I've done that, I've gotten some of the most interesting reactions from police officers. But mostly, they're usually like, have you been through this before? I'm like, yes, I have, sir. I'm like, okay, you can put your hands back in the car, and they'll be giggling, right? And my hands go right back in the car, top of the steering wheel, 10 and 2, finger spread. Okay. Um, we've set that situation up so that officer knows this person isn't, the vehicle's off, they're not going anywhere. I can see the keys, they're not trying to take off. The hands are at 10 and 2 or out of the window. They can see all the way through the vehicle. The windows are down, the dome lights on, all of that. They're like, all right, hey, I own this situation. You want them to feel that way. And at that point, it often disarms them, not disarms them, but they kind of bring it down a little bit because they see that you are being compliant and cooperative. Um, Moving in, that's the physical aspect of it. Does that make sense before I go into what to say and what
Yep,
not
go
to say?
ahead.
All right. When it comes in, when we start getting into what to say and what not to say, look, I am not trying to give police officers a hard time. It's not about that. But it is important that you know your rights. And it's also important that you know your legal obligations. Okay. If you are in the car, excuse me, if you are driving your car and you have a vehicle operator's license, which you need to be able to operate a motor vehicle in any place in the United States on public roadways, you need a vehicle operator's license. When that officer comes to ask you for your license, there is no debate about it. There's nothing to debate. Okay. Sir, I need to see your driver's license. Why'd you pull me over? We'll get to that in a second. Can I see your license? Give them your license. There's nothing to debate about. People have been killed. And again, we have footage of this, that because they decided to debate with police about, not having a license, moving around the vehicle, getting out of the vehicle, running, or whatever the case is, just give them your license. That's it. From there, why did you pull me over? You have a right to ask that question, and they're supposed to answer. I've gotten interesting answers. I've asked, officer, can you tell me why you pulled me over? You were speeding. How fast was I going? I don't know. I have to check. You have to check. That's the one thing you pulled me over for, and you don't know how fast I was going? That's fine. Now, I didn't say that. I wouldn't advise saying that. That was my thoughts. Okay. But at that point, it's like, okay. They're like, all right, well, I need to see your license, registration, insurance, whatever the case may be. Before I move, I get confirmation before I do anything. Okay. Um, Officer, my wallet is in my back right pocket. Let's go deep. Back right pocket. Okay. Go ahead and get your license. All right. Well, I'm going to reach for it. Can I reach for it? Yes. And then I say I'm reaching. This isn't meant to be a production. This isn't meant to be anything that's going to bother them, annoy them. You're not playing a game. You are being very cautious and going about that. Officer, I'm moving my hand. I'm using my index and my thumb to get my wallet. Okay. I have my wallet. All right. And they might just be like, yeah, man, come on, give me your wallet. Don't rush. Comes up and it comes around. And I'm like, officer, it's coming around. Can you hear me, Kevin?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Um, it comes around the side of my body. And I'm like, officers come around the side of my body. They can see it. So when they see this black thing, this wallet or whatever, they know what it is. Pull my license out. I give it to them. All right. I need to see your registration. Registration might be in the glove box. Officer, it's in the glove box. You're like, all right, get it. Can I? And then again, Can I get it? Yes, get it. All right, I'm reaching for it. See what I mean? Always get confirmation. At that point in time, I go ahead and get it, not digging, not moving too fast, get what I need to get, give that to them. That's it. Um, to make sure that you are articulating your movements and saying, this is what I'm doing, this, and getting confirmation before you do it, it alleviates a lot of things. Now, is this important to do just because you're black or white? I think it depends on, it's not so much being black, white, brown, or tan, or whoever. My main concern is the officer that I'm dealing with. All right. Some people, and I can give you different anecdotes, but some people are great at these traffic stops. They are so relaxed. They are pros. They know when to escalate. They know when to keep it cool and calm. I've had police officers cracking me up at a traffic stop. But you never know how that's going to go. That's why I explain it that way. When they start asking you questions, that's when it's time to stop answering a bunch of questions and giving a bunch of answers to their questions. All right. Well, Kevin, where are you coming from? Um, Pardon me, officer, but am I being detained? No, I'm just curious. Where are you coming from? Respectfully, officer. I respect your job, but I don't really want to get into my day with you. But if you don't mind, am I getting a ticket for something? No, just curious. So where are you going? Headed north. You don't have to get into a bunch of detail. Why would I say that? Well, here's the deal. A lot of times that people they've been arrested, they've been uh, they've been a person of interest, they have been fitting the description when they say, well, yes, I was at church. Oh, okay. What church do you go to? Oh, I go to this church on the south side on this street and this street. It's interesting, Kevin, because there was a guy with your vehicle description and your actual description, and there was a shooting over there, right? That turns into a completely different situation, and I can give you case after case of people who have offered too much information that ended up getting arrested. They ended up sometimes not just going to jail. Some of these folks went to prison. Some of these folks were on trial before they found out that they had the wrong person. All right. And it all came from talking far too much. You did something brilliant when you opened this up. You started with the Miranda rights. All right. Do you still have them in front of you?
Yeah. You have the
Well, I
right to
want you to
remain
read.
silent.
Go
You have
ahead.
the right to remain silent. Anything that you say can and will be held and used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you.
Okay. Now, this is the way that Miranda rights should be read. All right. Same words, a little bit of a variation, a little bit more emphasis on certain things. And this will help you understand why it's important to understand what they're trying to tell you in this thing. You have the right to remain silent because anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Nothing you say can help you. You get to trial, nothing you say that can help you will be used. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. And we want to express that so much that we will hook you up with one if you can't afford it. All right? Now, you have the right at any time to stop not answer any questions or make any statements. Now, do you understand these rights as I've read them to you? Yes. Having those rights in mind, do you really want to talk to me? That's how it should be read. Because if you understand what they're saying, you have the right to remain silent because anything you say is going to hurt you. We want to give you an attorney. We will literally give you an attorney. All right. If you can't afford one, And you don't have to say anything. You don't have to answer any questions, make any statements. And then they'll ask, do you wish to talk to me? Having these rights in mind, do you wish to talk to me? Absolutely not. Why would I? You literally just told me everything. You gave me people. We have heard this in movies. We've heard this in Bad Boys. We've heard this in NYPD Blue and Law and Order and CSI Miami. And you still talk to the cops. Stop talking. Now, there's some detectives out there that are going to be like, and I've heard this. I've only heard this once, and it was a little bit irritating. But they were like, Dotson, you're making our job a little bit more difficult for us. I'm like, how am I making your job difficult? If anything, I'm making you better at it, because now you just can't pull the wool over someone's eyes or blow smoke in their face like, oh, well, you don't know the law, so let me just manipulate that. Okay. I want you to be empowered. And the more you know, the better off. But all you really need to know is not so much your First Amendment, what everybody likes to talk about in these YouTube videos where they're trying to give people instruction or these instances where they're trying to get cops, bust cops and make them look bad or whatever so they can get likes and reactions and stuff. Forget that. Oh, you have a First Amendment right to do X, Y, and Z. They're not talking about your Fourth Amendment, which is your right to search and seizure. They're not talking about the Fifth Amendment, right? Which is your right not to be a witness against, okay? They're not talking about your Sixth Amendment, which is your right to an attorney. They're talking about, oh, you can say whatever you want and I can film, da da da. No, your Fourth Amendment, your Fifth Amendment, your Sixth Amendment. It's brief. Look it up. It's there for you. And if you understand, and again, you don't have to be a law scholar, you don't have to be an attorney, you don't have to be a prosecuting attorney, a judge, police officer. This stuff is there for you. And you can use that same little tool that you got watching your twerking TikTok videos and actually Google something and say, oh, that's my right. Oh, and then the same way, when you look at the things that I share with people and the things that I talk about, if you see something that you don't like with that, that should be a clue of what you should be seeking for police reform. Because when I share all of these things and I tell people like, hey, this is what it is. This is the law. This is the policy. This is the training. This is the procedure. If you understand those things, it's really basic. And then if you want to get things to change, well, I don't think that should be a procedure. Well, that means the training has to change. It means the policy has to change. It means the law has to change. It might just be a policy change, but a lot of times it might be about the law. If that's the case, now you know what to ask for. All right. The more you know, now you know how to challenge your governor, your senators and congresspersons and mayor and whoever it is to make these changes. You just can't say we want police reform. We just want this thing to change. That means nothing to them. You can go to Red Lobster if you want to and ask for a Whopper. They're going to look at you like you're crazy. It's not even on the menu. What are you talking about? All right. But if you go there, and also if you go there and you go to Red Lobster and you say, they're like, oh, sir, what would you like to eat? Just bring me what you got. Guess what? You're going to get what they give you.
Right.
And you're probably not going to like it. And that's a lot of what we got here in Washington State, because we have people asking for police reform and they didn't specify what they wanted. And now we're like 3 years into amendments to those original changes to the law. It all starts with understanding what it is that needs to be done, the things that you like, you don't like, all of that. But as I went through explaining like what to do at a traffic stop, you understand these things. It's also important, although I've given you some direction on this, make sure that you understand what it is that you should be doing in your specific state. Okay, states will change.
I want to ask another question. I have a camera in my car. Mm-hmm. People use their cell phone to videotape anytime an officer is pulling them over for whatever. Does the officer have the right to tell you to stop videotaping, or do you have the right to record what's going on?
You have the right to record. They cannot take your phone. They cannot tell you to turn that off. They can tell you, you don't have to. And Does that mean that they will respect that? No, we've seen that time and time again as well. There are also situations where there are officers that, unfortunately, don't. And all right, let me clarify this. There are some situations where officers might not know the law, but also be aware that there are tons of laws, tons of codes. It is impossible for any one human being, and I don't care if it's, we're dating ourselves, Johnny Cochran or
Yeah.
whoever, to, no matter how great of an attorney they are, no one knows. Not, I don't care what judge it is, how long they've been on the bench. I don't care if they're Supreme Court justice. Not one individual knows every law and every code and every statute on the books. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's important to know these things. And so, when I'm talking about like how to go about, you know, what to say in those situations, I'm very clear about understanding where you are in regards to that. If you're in North Carolina, for instance, and you're asking about, and you have an officer that walks up and asks, "Hey, I need to see your identification, Kevin." Well, you need to give them your identification. And another thing I didn't add to the traffic stop is if you're armed in Washington, in North Carolina, you have to tell that officer
I
that
was
you're
going to
armed.
ask that question.
You must tell them. Washington State, two things. One, officer walks up to me, not driving, walking on the street. "Hey, Kevin, I need to see, well, they don't know your name. Sir, I need to see your identification." Um, "Sorry, officer, am I being detained or something?" "No, no, we're just checking on some things." I don't have to show you my identification in Washington State. Washington State is a no stop and ID state. So I don't have to do that. Are there certain officers that might not know what those laws or codes are? Yeah, that unfortunately happens where they don't know, but something that simple that they probably ask a lot and they don't know the law. That's a little bit irritating because you're like, "Hey, I know it. How do you not know this?" Real quick, I had an issue with one of my neighbors, and didn't it wasn't a 911 call. It was a complaint I made to the county. They sent out the county sheriff in very short order, which I was surprised. And I went out there, and again, just me being me. I know I'm not a small black dude. I mean, I'm a black man in my neighborhood, not a small guy. I'm walking up on him. He doesn't know I'm the one that called. And, I know he didn't see me at first. And I stood back and I'm like, "Hey, officer." And he turns around and he's like, "Oh, hey." And then, I put my hands down. I don't put my hands in my pockets. That is often, again, some people like to hurt, ambush cops. They don't know who you are. So I don't go put my hands any place that they can't see them. And I say, "Hey, I'm the one who called. This is, and I told them about the issue. And it was a vehicle that was parked, an oversized vehicle. It was a dump truck that was parked on our residential street for like 10 days, taking up like half of the street. It was ridiculous. And it was a safety concern. And so I said, well, this vehicle is more than 85 inches wide. And it's also across from mailbox, which is against the postmaster code." And he said, "Well, how do you know that?" And I was like, "If you don't mind, I have the codes in my pocket." He said, "Oh, really?" Pulled out the codes and I gave it to him. And he looked and he said, "I didn't know that it was 85 inches, that the vehicle couldn't be wider than 85 inches on a public roadway." And he looked at me. He said that out loud, and he looked at me. He said, "Look, by the way, not all of us know all the laws and codes. It's impossible, and I know that." And I told him, I'm like, "Man, I'm former law enforcement. I get it." He was like, "Oh, okay, cool." But most people don't know that, and they appreciate that kind of thing. So it's important to know what to do in those situations. I spoke about firearms really quick. The only thing that's different about a firearm in a vehicle, one thing I would mention about that is, even if you're in a state not obligated, I live in a state in Washington State, I am not obligated to tell any police officer when I'm on the street, as if it's like a carry stop, like somebody uh, approaching me on foot, or if they are pulling me over, I'm not obligated to tell them that I have a firearm. Okay. I won't lie to them if they were to ask, but I'm not obligated to tell them. Do I choose to tell them? Yes. That has saved my life. The fact that I actually told an officer that I was armed. And most times I am. When I move around the world, I usually have a firearm on me, or in very rare instances, it's not on me, but it is nearby. And I'll give you just a quick example. I was going through a very well known gang area in Seattle, and I just left a midnight basketball event, for kids in the community. And I'm driving through this area, and I knew I saw an unmarked car. Sure enough, they lit me up. Um, the officer comes to my window. I go through all the steps that I told you. Hands right top of the steering wheel. He comes up, license registration. Real short, kind of curt about it, right? And I tell him, and I said, officer, my wallet is in my, I think, yeah, it was in my right rear pocket at that time. And I said, it's in my right rear pocket, but I also have a firearm in a holster on my right side. Understand, I do not go, oh, it's over here. I'm not moving. Okay. You can tell them exactly where it is and the condition that it's in without moving. It's on my right hand side in a holster. And he says, okay. I said, he was like, okay, well, just give me your license. And I said, I'm going to reach for it. He said, I'm going to reach for my license. He said, go ahead, man. And I'm like, all right, I'm reaching for it. So confirmation, get the wallet. And as I do this, I have a leather jacket on, have a hoodie. The hoodie is tucked behind my firearm. Here's a note to all you private citizen gun carriers out there that probably don't take lessons or any type of good tactical training. Never have more than one layer between you and your firearm. All right. If you're carrying it for self-defense, there shouldn't be multiple layers that you have to dig through to get to it. So in this situation, my hoodie was tucked behind the firearm, and I have a leather jacket on. So now all I have to do, that draw stroke, is just moving my jacket out of the way and then, drawing if I needed to. Cops know this. So hand on the steering wheel, and I lean forward to go to get the wallet out of my back pocket. And Kevin, I I know to this day, I'm sure of it, we would not be having this conversation um, if I didn't notice this. I looked and I saw movement in my periphery. There was another officer standing there, and she had her hand. So this is a very well-known kind of a violent area, especially at that time of night. Lots of shootings and stuff. And she has her hand on her gun, and she's doing what she needs to do. She's looking, right? And I see that, and I was like, oh my God. And the officer says, what's wrong? And I was like, can you tell your partner that I have a firearm in my holster? And he says, I will. And I said, okay. He says, well, are you going to get your wallet? I said, are you going to tell her, officer? And he said, he's armed. He's got a pistol in his right hand side in a holster. What her response was is what scared me the most. She relaxed. She said, oh, okay. Had I not made sure he said that, that would have looked like what we would call a draw stroke, right? For me, she would have saw me getting my wallet. She would have seen the pistol handle. She would have shot me, not knowing who I am, not knowing that I was just getting my wallet. That would have looked like a draw stroke to her. There's no other reason for her to, if at the very least, the gun comes out of her holster, I believe she's shooting me at that point. And her relaxing at that point really is what shocked me. Like, whoa, this could have gotten bad. This could have gone very bad. Just so happens that I was in a meeting the next day with the Seattle police chief, a guy who was a Seattle police chief at the time. His name was John Diaz. And I tell him, and I'm like, hey, chief, I got to tell you something that happened last night. He's a Mexican chief, yeah, John Diaz. He his face turns red. He's like, what? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh my God, Derrick, are you serious? He was like, are you all right, first of all? And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm cool. But I got to tell you, that was scary, like, and he was like, yeah. He was like, we're probably not, and he said, he was like, we're probably not having this conversation had you not picked up on that. I shared that to say that's why it's important to go through these things. Maybe you're visiting Seattle or someplace. You don't know what type of area you're in. You don't know that they have these patrols that are a bit more vigilant, and and to know that they might be riding two officers in that vehicle. I had no idea until I happened to see that, and that could have changed the entire course of events that night, and maybe for my entire life. I say that to say that if you are going to carry a firearm or have a firearm in the vehicle, it's best that that is not a surprise. Yes, it is your right. You have your own. You can make your own decision on that. When you decide to say that, I would not say, "Hey, I got a gun in here." That doesn't go over so well. All you have to do is say, in most situations, if it is concealed, you probably have a concealed pistol license. And so all you have to do is say, I have a concealed license. And a smart officer is going to deduce that there's a gun in the car, right? Like, oh, okay, well, he's got a license and he's telling me, so there's probably a gun in the car. And if you do, just say, hey, there's a firearm in the vehicle. Say what condition it's in. Don't go reaching and touching for it. People like to bring up Philando Castile when I talk about this. And that was a tragic situation. It was just horrible, and for multiple reasons. But there are issues on both sides of that. And I know people don't like it when I say this, but again, coming from an objective point of view, as a trainer, as a law enforcement officer, as somebody that gets pulled over, and every time I get pulled over, I've never been pulled over and there's not been a gun in the car. All right. Except when I was a kid. But other than that, no. And when that happens, I'm going to be very clear about what it is, where it is, what condition it's in, all of these things. You can make that decision, but I want to make sure that people are understanding that it's up to you. But if you're going to do that, officers have been in so many different situations, and they can articulate that if they were to use force. Hey, it's been part of my training that this is what happens when someone gets hurt. An officer gets shot, has been in this exact situation. And when you see these officers that are acquitted, it's because they can articulate why they did it, and they end up getting away with it. It's not getting away with it, excuse me. They are found not guilty, they're acquitted because it fell within the confines of the law. And a lot of times they go back to their training. And so it's really important to understand, again, these things and what to do, what not to do, what to say, what not to say. It doesn't need to be complex. I know I'm giving you a lot of detail. It's
No,
not
I'm
very
fine with it.
complex.
That's why I let it ride.
Yeah, yeah. I want people to understand that detail because I do believe this is something that police agencies should be sharing with the public. This should have happened a long time ago. It still hasn't, and I don't believe it will, which is why I'll be doing this for a long time. And I think the more that people know, the less you're going to be afraid, the less people that are going to be hurt. And as we focus on the younger generation, we get to change the course of history by making sure that families aren't destroyed or by facing these tragedies and losing the lives of our young people, the future of our world, because they simply weren't told what to do in these situations. I think that is a horrible thing, and that's why I spend so much time talking about it the way that I do in the detail that I get into it with.
And that's much appreciated. Now that I'm thinking about it, the easiest way to go ahead and have this conversation is that it should be part of, every child, no matter what race, color, gender, however you identify yourself. When you get a legal driver's license in whatever state or province that you live in. I think this should be part of understanding the law when you get your driver's test and be tested on
I'm
it.
working on it.
I think I think that that will eliminate the bias within the home or the personal experiences in the home. Because as you're thinking, you know, you gave a big number, and I've not put a number to how many times I've been stopped. But I also know that I have that hero mentality. I know what it's like, to see an officer being manhandled by a perpetrator. And because I am one of those physical people, I purposely got involved on the behalf of the officer to only have myself handcuffed with a gun to my head by his comrades, and thinking that I could have been shot, and I'm helping a law enforcement officer because I think as a citizen that I have that right, but the law turned on me, which it makes you second guess about getting involved, or why you should get involved or how the law is going to perceive you, because I am a physical threat to most people. One, I'm physically able to protect myself, and I've been in situations that I've had to protect myself. And like I said, my biggest fear is that on a bad day or having a family member abuse and whatever, I'm more amped to defend than to sit there and keep my mouth shut. So I've learned a lot from you in this interview, to stay calm, to keep my cool, to keep my passenger self cool, not to be deliberate in my emotions, and being um, present and being mindful of the way the conversation that is given to me is being received, and my conversation back to him, how it's being interpreted. You gave a lot of good information, and I appreciate you for what you're doing. I did want to talk about qualified immunity, but I think that's going to be a longer conversation. But
Okay.
I've been asked several times, and I've given my interpretation. But I am going to ask you, since you're the person of in training, you're the expert here. I'm not the expert. This is my interpretation. What exactly is qualified immunity, and why should we end it? And if not, why not?
So qualified immunity, what people don't talk about qualified immunity. So qualified immunity is um, essentially as long as it makes sure that officers can't be sued directly in the course of their duties, or as a result of their duties. Um, Essentially, as long as they can articulate that they were acting in good faith, that they will not be likely be held accountable for certain actions. And qualified immunity, you have to understand though, again, this is where race does come into it. Qualified immunity was preceded by the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. Now, if you think about what was happening in 1871, that was during Reconstruction, post-slavery, Reconstruction. Black folks building schools and churches and law practices and whatever, right? Everything. People were growing, were progressing, and then you got the original haters in America, the Ku Klux Klan. They come through and they start terrorizing black folks, right? Straight up domestic terrorism. Um, I think the estimates are somewhere about between 2 and 3,000 people were that they could document were killed and tortured or maimed during that time. Okay, the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 was they were to put a stop to. That's when color of law started. They started talking about color of law. Color of law is basically someone who uses they're under the guise of their authority as a politician or whoever, and they will violate your rights based on their position. Police officer, right? Like a police officer abusing their rights, your rights, your civil rights. That's color of law. Okay, they're acting under the guise of state authority and abusing your rights because of everything that was happening at that time, Congress passed the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, which basically prohibits that. And a lot of the people, you have to understand, that were Ku Klux Klan members at that time were also politicians and judges and police officers, right? And so fast forward, I think it's, again, you can always check me if I say it wrong, but I think it's 1967 is when qualified immunity comes in, because what happened, from what I remember at that time, were there were four preachers that were there were these four preachers that were being chased by a mob. They ended up going into a bus station. I think it was a restroom and a bus station that was it was a waiting area that was in a bus station, and it was a whites only bus area. Instead of police officers protecting them, which would have been their duty, they arrested them and they sued the police because they should have protected them, but they arrested them for going to a whites only area because they went into that whites only area to protect themselves from being killed. And so after that, I believe this is 1967, that's when qualified immunity comes in. And that's when it begins to protect police officers from doing, from being in a place where they can be sued easily for anything that they might do that might be not in accordance with the law or police policy. It's gotten worse and worse and worse to the point that, and it doesn't make sense, and I still wonder how this was passed, but it's gotten to the point that in qualified immunity, you have to be able to prove that this case has been heard before for you to be able to sue the police. So if there's no precedent, you can't sue. Precedent meaning that that case has been heard. There's a similar case that's been heard before, right? Precedent, like when you hear, when you go to, when you watch like these Law and Order shows and stuff like that, and they talk about
Right.
case law, right? Case law are the previous cases, and they've made major decisions have come from those cases, and that's where they say precedent, right? So we can show that this type of thing has happened. If that hasn't happened, you can't sue. So it's like, well, at some point, sometime there's going to be a first for everything.
Right.
So you're saying that I can't do anything unless it's already happened before? And I'm not just talking about something kind of like this. No, it has to be this type of situation, like this, and this, at this place, this time, this type of whatever circumstance. It's ridiculous. And now, do I believe that in these situations with qualified immunity, there are a lot of cops that say, I don't want to do my job, if there's no qualified immunity. And I get where they're coming from, in the sense that, yes, you might actually be acting in good faith, okay? And you might be in a active shooter response, hypothetical, active shooter response situation, and it's a crowded mall, and you press off around, you fire around through your pistol, and that hits someone else. That person dies or is a paraplegic for the rest of their life. Well, I get how that would feel. Like, man, you're really trying to stop the situation, but now you're going to be sued into oblivion because you were trying to save lives. I get that. Where I'm coming from is, if you are doing your job in a way where you are not acting in good faith, there's an officer out here that's getting ready to go to trial for basically executing a man that he had no reason to shoot. The man had already been shot. He was no longer a threat. A few seconds had passed before he even fired the second round, shot him in the head. Like, it's only because the laws have recently changed that he's going to trial. The fact is that they should have, he was protected by qualified immunity at the time, right? So he wasn't being sued, directly. The police department kept him on, those types of things. And I think that when you have these types of issues, it creates less confidence from the community towards law enforcement, because you're like, y'all just getting away with everything, right? It's not that they're getting away with it. It's the way the laws are written. And so this is, again, if you don't like it and it doesn't make sense to you, I would urge you, I always urge you, look it up, learn a little bit about it, and then challenge them with it, because that's where you're going to get the change from. I don't mind talking to police chiefs or whoever. I know enough that I can make people squirm, right? I can make things a little bit uncomfortable because I know what it is. But the more you know, the more you can challenge them with your police use of force policies. I don't care what city you live in. Google it. That same little device for your twerking videos, you can look it up. Go ahead and Google use of force, Seattle Police Department. You might find their use of force policy. It's not going to be difficult to understand. Understand the people that are doing these jobs are also people. And again, not to demean police officers, but in Washington State, for instance, you only have to be 20 years old with a GED. So these laws aren't written, these policies aren't written for people to have a difficult time to understand. Okay. You look up that policy. Oh, this is when police can use force in Seattle. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't like that. Make a note of it. That's the thing to go forward with. That's how we start getting the changes that we want in our communities.
I'm glad you brought it up because I had made myself a note. And I said, with qualified immunity, an officer is more likely to be struck by lightning than they are to be contributed to a settlement or a judgment against a police officer for misconduct. So you pretty much said that, and I'm glad you did that. We learned a lot from you tonight, and I know there's a lot more. You have a wonderful book on Police and Me that's on Amazon. You can get it. Hopefully, you put it on Audible. I hope this conversation that we had today changes on both sides, be it right or wrong, but more right so than wrong. That all children, every person that owns a driver's license should have some awareness of what their rights are when stopped by a police officer. And hopefully someone will use this as a training video. Like I said, you've been protecting billionaires for a reason. It's because you are the real deal. You're no joke. You say it lightly that you are a physical presence. Opposing would be a better word. If I were to walk down a dark street, I want Derrick Dotson on my backside. And trust me, I won't let you down in the process. But, in the event that you decided to go Hollywood and put on a show, you are the original bad boy when it comes to that. And I'm actually hoping that Hollywood becomes diverse and starts looking at people such as yourself to come in and be expert trainers for movies and TV shows and whatever. So, because a lot of our education is now through that small screen. I think movie makers and creators should be socially responsible with content they're putting out there. Mm-hmm. So in the event that you have to have a traffic stop, don't sensationalize and take a life just because it shows good and it makes you go, wow. There should be some responsibility of education attached to it. So I hope this opens the door for bigger and better things for you. There's 107 historically Black colleges around this country. Derrick Dotson should be a speaker at 107 of these colleges to let young people know, because there's more arrest and more violence on college campuses, especially our Black campuses, especially in our states that have multiple consonants and vowels in it. I don't need to have to explain any of that to anybody. Pick one you can spell. But this has been wonderful, and this should be in the library of every single elementary school, primary school throughout the country, no matter what color your child's skin is, no matter if it's private, homeschool, or charter school. This should be a staple in it to understand all cops are not bad. and all cops are just as human, and everyone is subject to a good day and bad day, but we all need to remain calm. Now, if you had to say one takeaway from this interview that you want people to take away from it, what would that be, Derrick? I don't say
Mm.
one takeaway. Just say the takeaways you would like to have this in this interview. What people should take away from it.
I would hope that, out of, I would really hope that out of all of the things that I've shared, that you understand that when it comes to down to interacting with police, it's not just about the fear. I understand why people are afraid. They're afraid based on the things that they've seen and they've heard, and they've seen on television, on the news, on social media. Understand that there are answers for this. Fear also leads to a lot of mistakes. Sometimes fear can keep you safe, but in regards to interacting with police, a lot of times people make these mistakes, and the first thing they do one of three things that makes it really difficult to walk away from these situations safely: is they resist, which means they pull away, or they're showing some type of aggression towards the officer. So it could be resisting, running away from the officer. Now they have to chase you and catch you, and they're going to have to use force to do that. Or you fight the officer, and again, that's based on perception, and you hope that they use the right level of force to bring you under control and detain you. Understand that when you start off these situations, what I really want you to take away is, first of all, walk into these situations calm. All right. Um, Understand what your rights are for where you are and what you do, whatever state you're in, whatever city you're in. Understand the municipality, understand your state laws, know what you should be doing in those situations. But you can use the traffic stop in situations that example that I gave you about how to conduct yourself. You can also look at these situations and understand that if you know the basics, the basic laws for where you are and what you do, and you don't resist, you don't run, you don't fight, you are more than halfway home. All right. You are more than halfway through that situation. It could be that you're getting arrested and going to jail. At least you're going to be alive. All right. You can challenge that in court. You have you get to fight again. You get to challenge another day. Okay. I want you to understand that a lot of the things that you've seen with law enforcement officers. I tell you one thing: police, good police, and when I say police, I'm talking about federal, state, and municipal agents and officers, do not like bad cops. They make everything so much harder for everyone else. And so when I've been pulled over, or when you get pulled over, when you interact with police, most times it's probably just somebody that's trying to do their job the best way that they know how. Um, don't make it any more difficult. Know what you need to know your rights, know your legal obligations, don't resist, don't run, don't fight, know the laws where you are and what you do. You do that, you're more than halfway home. If you don't know what else to share with your kid, your teenager, your loved one, the friend that gets in trouble all the time with the police, share that with them. All right, you might be saving a life, and that's the focus that I'm here to do. I would hope that if you enjoyed this, or if you've found this enlightening, you go to the Black Sanctuary YouTube channel. I haven't promoted it much, but it's a professionally done series, brief series, it's a 10-part series, short videos, but mostly things that you probably haven't seen or heard elsewhere in regards to law enforcement and law enforcement education. All of these things are things that will help you and your loved ones, the people that you love and care about, when they leave the house, or you leave the house every day. You understand these things, and we want you to be able to get back home. That is my job. That is what I'm here to do, and I appreciate your support in it. I'd appreciate you purchasing this book. We have an ambassador campaign where you can adopt a school, or you can sponsor a police department. You can buy books for police departments or schools. If you want me to come speak, reach out to me at contact@theblacksanctuary.com. And if you want me to come speak to a school, or you want to set up a tour for a specific city, I have a few coming up this fall. And I love doing these things. I love reading to the kids. I love the opportunity to be able to work in collaboration with police departments when I do that. This is something that is picking up across the country, and I love this work. And when it comes down to the HBCUs, I'm a HBCU graduate of Norfolk State University, proud graduate of an HBCU, and I would love to be able to do, share this experience with the freshman classes of these universities, to share these things when they're leaving home for the first time and nobody's ever taught them these things. They're in a brand new place and you don't know what to do, and that's when things get pretty dangerous, when you just don't know. That's what I want to be there for. Utilize me, folks. This is my purpose, and this is what I'm here for you.
And Derrick, you're living the dream. And for those of you that I've called out, I've called you out on purpose. And if you're one of those officers that are questionable, it's okay to change. It's okay to be a good cop. And for whatever reason that you made decisions that are not popular to your family members or to your career or to the uniform that you wear, change is hard, but it's doable. And if you listen to Derrick today, many of the lessons in life that you now use as protocol, this man has written. He's basically broke it down to you. For those of you that wake up every single day and challenge the law, it's time to stop working against the system and be part of a system that is going to let you thrive. All right, because I know from the neighborhood I come from, I had to make a choice, either be part of my environment or be an example of what my environment could be. And I chose to be an example, just like Derrick, you have chose to be. Again, you can go to www.theblacksanctuary.com and reach out, watch, educate yourself. You can reach him on Facebook. He's also on LinkedIn. I believe if you type in Derrick Dotson, you will show up. And if you're looking for a dynamic speaker, a dynamic entertainer, this man has a message. He's written a wonderful book, The Police and Me, that everyone needs to read. As a person, an author, to another author, I say everyone that's ever written a book, the easiest way that we're all going to become bestsellers is to buy each other's book. Go to Amazon and buy his book. Share it with your children. Read it. It's an easy read. It's not that complicated. This will be a book that you would love to read. Derrick, I asked this, and I'm saying this to my friends in Hollywood. This is a young brother that you guys should be connecting with to help with your coordination of stunts and action movies. Because I know Bad Boy just came out. I've had many friends say even though they didn't like the way Will Smith conducted himself, Bad Boy was hilarious and it was a good movie. I would love, my wish for you, and I always ask, if I had one ASK for my guests, what will it be? And I've had 5 people on this show that have answered this question and their dream has come true. So I'm going to ask you to think about this and ask big, and I'm going to ask for you. And I'm putting this out there to anyone that's doing stunts, looking for an expert in order to show you how to handle a gun, how to defend yourself, how to create a real life self-defense situation instead of some of the hokey dokey stuff that we see on here. You contact my brother right here, Derrick Dotson, because he is the real deal. He needs to be in that industry, especially with all the Black content creators out there. Derrick Dotson, you know how to reach him. If you don't, contact me at RMK Productions and Network. I'll even give you my phone number, 610-212-9870. I will connect you to this man. Like I said, ain't nothing fake about this brother. If I had to go into a questionable situation, that's the answer. So, Derrick, give me a little thought about this. I ran my mouth enough.
No, it's funny that you mentioned this because I have a friend that that we finally connected. We were very close in college, and I actually hadn't seen her in years, and we finally connected last year. I got to give her a shout out. Her name is Orion Smith, and turns out, so I'm like, hey, Orion, what have you been up to? And we were tight in college, and so she says that she's one of 50 Black stunt women in the world. And I'm like, what? what are you talking about? And she shows me these pictures of her doing stunts. I'm like, are you kidding me? And we started talking about it a little bit, and I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. I remember seeing some of these shows that she's on. One of the shows she was on was she's been on is FBI, and she's done a lot of stunts and stuff for that. And I was like, yeah, I was looking into doing some tactical consulting years ago, and I just happened to mention that. She was like, "You do that?" I was like, "Yeah, I've been a trainer, I've been a deadly force instructor, use of force, and a lot of the folks that I was fortunate. I didn't mention this, but I was very fortunate to be trained by, not just in law enforcement, but I trained with a company called Insights Training Center, and a lot of the cadre of those officers were all veterans, military special operators. Special operators like Green Beret, Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, those types of folks, right? And those are the folks that trained me way more than I would say. The reason why I had so many great experiences in law enforcement and had so many opportunities to work for so many agencies was because of my training, thousands upon thousands of hours with the best in the world. And so I was telling her about this, and she was like, "You do that?" And I'm like, yeah, but I didn't understand why she was making a big deal out of it. She was like, it's really hard to find Black men in this field with that skill set. And that's when I started thinking about it. Like, that could be interesting. I didn't think about it, as much when she first said it, but she was like, hey, if you're interested, you should send me a reel of you, doing some stuff. And I'm like, oh, that might be interesting. And I never followed up on it. But the more I thought about it, and now that you have mentioned it, I think it's something I need to move towards. It's something I really
Well,
wanted, I definitely wanted to do.
let me say this. Since she brought up putting together a reel, I'm going to do this for you. I own a production company. You put together the video. I'll help you write the copy, and I will produce the reel on my dime. I'll do that for you as a friend. That's one thing about about the circle of friends that I have. We all have a high call to action. I always say my friends don't drive by an accident; they stop and help. Um,
That's right.
so we're doers. We're people to get things done. The only thing that we always say, and this is every last one of my friends, is that it's always yes, just don't do anything to hurt us. And if that,
That's
then
right.
no follows right after that. And we're only as strong as our last no. So Derrick, you put it together. This will be for me. This is my gift to you to give back. And if anyone that's listening to this has any connection, and hopefully your friend opens the door, I'm going to tell you, Derrick's ready. He is the real deal. I mean, talking about an action hero. As a matter of fact, he does his all of his own stunts. All right. So with that said,
Oh man.
I ran long on this. So, to those of you that constantly critique me about, my videos should be shorter, I'm going to say, something, I'm a content creator. Sometimes stories need to be told and be abbreviated, and sometimes you need to hear the whole story. So, with that said, I want to say I appreciate all my loyal fans and friends and listeners, and I do hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking with Kevin and Son. I have showcased Mr. Derrick Dotson in this episode, and like I said, if you're offended by anything that was said, we try to be universal and DEI on this. But if you're offended by anything that I've said, I want you to check yourself, because if we said something that's true and you're offended by it, then you need to check yourself and adjust and shift. Um, Progress, good things are coming, and good things are coming for us all. So be universally kind. If you like what you've heard, go to RMK Productions and Network and our YouTube page, like and share this video. If you feel that you're a person of high call to action, then I'm going to ask you to subscribe and follow. But I will tell you, the struggle in this life is never ending. Freedom is never really won, is actually earned. And if you win, every generation wins when you earn it. So, with that said, find 1,000 reasons to be kind to someone. My grandfather always said, when you get to a place in life that you can help someone else out, he said, reach one, teach one. And with that said, we'll fade to black and we're out. Thank you, Derrick, my buddy.